at least for this hour. Let's set that aside and just focus on one thing. Here's what I want from all of you. What I would like all of you to be is happy. All right? Let's set what should be a low bar. Let's just make sure that everybody leaving this place is happy. Given all the opportunities you have ahead of you, if people in this room can't be happy, then that's a shame. It's also a slap in the face of the people out there who would give anything to have 1,000th of the opportunity you have for themselves or for their kids. Because if we can't do that, if we can't walk away from here and a few years from now be very, very happy with the choices we've made and the life we're living, then that's a problem. And that's what I would call a tragedy. And I use that word in a literal sense. Now, you're like, what did I walk into here? This is getting pretty dark, all right? It's going to get better, don't worry. When I use the word tragedy, I mean that in the literal sense. We've had tragedy with us in literature for many years. Thousands of years, people have been talking about tragedies in the literature. And one definition, and you can have lots of different definitions for what makes for a tragedy, but one definition of a tragedy is the following: a story in which the protagonist suffers extreme sorrow as a consequence of a grave error or a personal feeling that combines with external forces and circumstances. Or to put it more simply, the measure of tragedy is the following: it's the distance between how happy you could or would or should have been and how happy you actually are. The greater that distance, the greater that disparity, that's the measure of tragedy in this story. Here's what you could have been. Here's what you should have been. Here's what you had the opportunity to be. If there was never that opportunity, it's not a tragedy. It's just a pathetic situation. It's just a bad situation. It's a tragedy when we can imagine this person, this hero, this protagonist could have been this happy, but here's where they ended up. And what leads to that disparity, what leads to that difference in stories and in people's lives is usually a combination of two things: circumstance and choices. Difficult circumstances and poor choices. And what's interesting here is that for the group of us in this room, we don't have the ability to blame circumstances too much. For us, most of it's going to be about the choices. So that's what tragedy is. So what would be the opposite of tragedy? What would happen if we take that delta between what could have been and what is? How happy we could have been and how happy we are. What if we could eliminate that difference? What if that delta was 0? What kind of story would that be? And I'm going to suggest to you that a word that captures that story is genius. Now, genius has come to mean something particular in society. We think of genius as someone who's really good at something, someone who's the best at a certain thing. Einstein, genius. Mozart, genius. Michael Jordan, genius. All right? But the word genius actually comes from a slightly different place. If you go back to the roots of where genius really comes from, it used to mean something a little bit different. It didn't refer to being exceptional at something. It referred to the essence of something, what you might call the essence of a person or a thing, the ness of something. And by this definition, it makes less sense to ask, is this person a genius? And much more sense to ask, what is this person's genius? What is their genius? And what I'll suggest to you is responsible for eliminating the delta between how happy you could be and how happy you are, is the extent to which you understand and embrace your genius, what makes you you, what is your essence, and create a life and make the kind of choices that allows you to exhibit that genius every day. So that who you are and what you're doing are not two different things. You're not at work with a game face on, going through the motions, and then when you come home or on the weekends, you get to be you. That is not exhibiting genius in your life. And so what I want to talk about fundamentally are the choices we make that create one story or another. A story that you look back 50 or 60 years from now and ask yourself, was that a tragedy or was that pure genius?